Hello and welcome to this MIMHtraining.com presentation on how to be resilient. My name is Tom Pansella and I'm with the Missouri Institute of Mental Health, and we're joined today by Eric Hipple. And Eric is a former NFL quarterback. He spent 10 years with the National Football League, entirely with the Detroit Lions. His accomplishments include 2 playoff bids and a divisional championship, and in addition he was named the MVP for the 1981 season. Jersey hangs in Canton for a Monday Night Football debut deemed the best in NFL history. He's ranked 5th in all-time career passing yards in the Detroit record books. Since his retirement, he's been a freelance field reporter and was an analyst for the Fox Network's local pregame show. Most recently, he's been a professional motivational speaker, and he works as a sales consultant. His public speaking work, though, shifted to topics of depressive disorder awareness and treatment and to suicide prevention in 2000 after the tragic death of his own 15-year-old son due to suicide. He serves on the board of the AAS, the American Association of Suicidology. He works at the University of Michigan's Depression Center as an outreach coordinator. He was born in Texas and raised in California. He attended Utah State University and graduated with a degree in business administration with a computer science option. And after graduation, he was drafted by the Detroit Lions. He and his family remain in Michigan. That's where they call home. He's got a book out. It's called Real Men Do Cry, and it chronicles his life as an NFL quarterback from his youth to his current position, and his struggle with suicide loss and his own depression, and all these things that we'll talk about with him. His story is one of hope and recovery, and he uses education as well as practical advice to help others live and enjoy life again. And Eric, thank you for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So we've just kind of talked about it a little bit in your bio, but give us an overview of how you got to where we are right now.
Well, I'll give you the short version, which is, growing up and playing football and, kind of reaching a dream and making it to the NFL. But along that pathway, there's certain things that, that I never expressed, because I was afraid to, which is, my own dealings with depression and whatnot. But when I left the game and my son started experiencing those same things, I didn't really recognize what was going on. How do I help him? And eventually he died by suicide. And that's what sprung me into what I do now, which is, to go out and talk. But it took a long time for me to get there. After his death, I spiraled down real bad. And through my recovery and work in the field, I learned a lot of things about what depression is. And that was one of the big question marks, is why would a 15-year-old take his life? And not having that answer provided some of those answers that mental illness is real, and depression is real, and so the more that I learned about it, the more that I understood it, and at least so there's some peace, I guess, there to be found, and how we can become resilient, to fight off some of those things and issues and stresses that we have that can cause depression.
What did you recognize from your own youth, from your own young adulthood, that you then said you saw kind of reflected in your son?
Those feelings of separation sometimes, the sadness, the withdrawal, where, I felt like I was alone. Nobody quite got me. I thought I was a little bit different. To the idea where, I always, instead of having, peers, I always attached to adults a lot better, and in the evenings, having crying spells, where these things would bother me, and I get overwhelming sadness and cry at night and not understand why. And so those are the things I saw in him. And at the time when he was experiencing them, I thought, well, that's just part of life. He'll get through it. I did. And not understanding that we can actually do something, to treat it. And so those are the things that I picked up on,
And how did you go about the learning experience then?
The learning experience, like I said, I was kind of a hard-headed guy and wallowed for quite a bit. Before I had actually somebody say something to me that said, hey, I lost my son, and you can get through this. And I thought that was the first time really I heard of any hope whatsoever that this can come to an end and will come to an end. And so when I started getting a little bit better, I started reaching out and wanted to know the reason why these things happen. And then a lunch and learn with the University of Michigan doctors, and went there, and they were talking about all this, this stuff like it was, everybody knows about it, and I was totally flabbergasted. What? You know about this stuff? Wait. And so that was the beginning of my education process, and I kind of vowed at that point in time that to make sure that other people have the same information out there, that they're not kept in the dark like I was.
And who are the people that you've been reaching out to then?
About everybody that I can. It started off with schools. Guys had a, part of me was still beating for that age, and trying to help out, and then it shifted to communities, and then to professional organizations. Dentists, lawyers, professional groups, businesses, and then shifted into the military, into law enforcement, and then I'm working on a thing right now with the Michigan Department of Corrections, for example, working with the wardens and the correction officers and the staff, to help them a little bit more resilient against some very negative aspects going on, and budget cutbacks and stuff that they're being affected by, and then also my own peers, which is the former NFL players, that are having some difficult times as well.
So you see it in former players too?
Certainly. In fact, that's one of the kind of eye-opening things was, when you're going through these things, when you transition out of football and you're experiencing some downtime, stuff like, I'm the only one that's going through this. It must be something wrong with me, and I don't want to talk about this. But found out we actually did a survey and some research, for retired players, and found out that about 15% of them suffer from, moderate to severe depression. And in that information as well, we also found out that a lot of guys don't talk about stuff, afraid of being weak, thought it was part of life, and some of them even dealt with stuff, they knew something was wrong, but dealt with it in a tight circle of friends, not, to professionals. And all that is because of the barrier of a stigma, of not knowing that there's something they can, either education-wise, they can do something about it, or because they're afraid to.
Well, I think you touched on a couple of things there, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about the stigma. Where do you see the stigmas coming into play?
Well, if there's a bunch of different stigmas that are out there, and let's just take the basic one is, being a man is, we're, ever since I was a little kid growing up in football, you don't want to show weakness because you want to be the guy on the field. If I show weakness, I'm going to get benched. I've got to be tough. I've got to be the leader. And just as a man itself, that's kind of the role that we kind of take sometimes, that we can't show weakness. We're not supposed to. Well, that's that kind of a cultural thing, because in reality, it's not weak, first of all, and second of all, it's the responsible thing to do is to be mentally healthy. And so if we're going to be mentally healthy, then we have to have that it's okay to seek that mental mental health support, to make sure that we are mentally healthy. That's the really responsible thing to do, not to run away from it and hide from it and hope that it goes away.
Are you dealing also with current players?
Current players right now, no, we don't, because it's pretty tight. It's kind of hard to penetrate that field, that force field around a team. It's kind of hard to get in there, and even at the college level, it's hard to get in. The coaches have, but they have done dramatic changes, which they do have psychologists now that's on staff. For the NFL, each team has to have one on staff that interacts with the players. And that's a huge change than the way it used to be. And so that idea, and it's funny that you say that, because just the idea of, there's a sports psychologist here is, destigmatizing in the fact that you're going to be better to talk to a sports psychologist because he'll make you perform better because you're mentally healthy. So that's there now. So within the current framework, there are changes that are being made in that culture.
But you also work with other school organizations. Is that at what level? Is that elementary? Is that high school, college? What?
It's it actually, my primarily shift, at the beginning was in the high schools, as I say, because one of the major onsets of depression is age 15 to 19, and I think if one in five high school seniors within the previous 12 months have talked about suicide, thought about suicide. So there's a big risk group there, and that's where I focused in on. But I noticed as we started talking more and more about it, we're starting to see 8th graders, die by suicide and stuff. So that shift went down into the middle schools as well. It's still age appropriate, but it was at least identifying, that, and trying to give them some of these resilient factors and stuff. It's okay to talk, it's okay to work through these things, and that's not a weakness. In fact, it's the good thing to do.
Let's spend a little time talking about resilience, because that's what you're out there trying to push. Give us kind of your definition and your approach here.
Well, resilience, the way that I look at it is, we can't escape stress. It's a part of our lives. We can't escape, the things that we have to go through, in just everyday life itself. And how we work and how we manage that stress can be everything. Understanding where the stress is coming from, what exactly does it do to your body, how does it affect you? It doesn't just affect your mind. Your mind controls a lot of different things, and so it's an overall body experience. And so it affects your sleep, it affects your appetite, it affects the way that you process nutrients. It affects your pain levels, how you feel. It affects your perceptions and how you perceive things. How you look at things, and so all those things are all part of it. And so if we can manage that stress a little bit better, what ultimately happens is somebody who's going through those things, all those changes, what happens is their problem-solving abilities become less. And so what you end up is sliding kind of down the scale. It's all of a sudden, in the case of a suicide, that becomes the problem-solving tool that they're using to solve a problem. Well, let's solve it back up in here. Let's give some resilience to the fact that these stresses hit us. How do we manage the stresses before it beats us down and becomes a negative stress? There's positive stress that we need, and there's also negative stress. And that takes a lot of work, to manage that stress. And so let's get some tools so we can manage them up here. So a simple thing that happens to us, maybe it's a financial thing, maybe it's a relationship thing. It's in schools, it's huge in relationships, because everything's now. And so when something happens like that, how do we deal with it rather than let it get us down here? And so the resilience thing that I look at is what tools can we have to manage those things? And the three things that really pop out to me and that works is having a purpose, being able to communicate well, because if you can communicate well, you can be able to say what's happening, and it can also see and ask questions and learn. And then the third thing is support, that it's okay to ask for support, but it's also okay to give support. So those two issues back and forth. Because those three things, it can make us pretty resilient to a lot of the stresses that we face and a lot of the problems that we might have, and how to navigate through this life that we have that's got all its bumps and journeys and valleys and everything in it.
How do you do that with the high school and younger population?
Well, high school and younger population, first of all, dealing with high school is to give them some tools. Being able to problem solve, in doing it with tools, is kind of like, what tools do you give them? And do simple things for example, for goal setting. You hear that term all the time. What's goal setting? And I used to goal setting. Great. But if you can explain to somebody, and you can do it through, I have actually interactions that show it. But if you can show somebody that they improve by having a goal, it doesn't mean they have to reach the goal, but just the fact they have a goal, they actually do better than they would on their own, or they would by people cheering them on. Motivation. Just adding that one little goal even takes them a little bit further. And so they don't have to reach the goal, but it makes them better by having one, because it gives you something to shoot for. And having that purpose, this is the reason why I'm doing something. I've got a goal, I want to reach it. They might not reach it, and that doesn't mean that tears you down. It means, but you got better by doing it. And so that's, one tool in itself that way. The other thing is how we communicate. The communication portion again. We are great, as technology-wise, as far as, texting and all the stuff that goes on. Great for information that goes out there, but it's not the emotional thing. And so you got to teach them how to communicate responsibly and stuff. So when somebody talks to somebody, understand what's happening here, so that emotional tie that we have for each other, the empathy that we have between people, is something that's, it's magical, and if we can experience it. Not this way, because this doesn't convey emotions. I could tell you, you've got great tie, okay? I texted that to you. Depending on what mood you're in, you're going to say, wow, he really likes my tie, or what a chump, man, he's making fun of my tie. But, I don't know, if I don't see you, I don't know what kind of frame of mind you're in, when I text that to you. So we have to be careful what we do, and how we communicate.
The title of your book, The Real Men Do Cry, and you talked about this a little while ago, too, talking about not being in a position to show emotion as sometimes with anybody, but especially with males. How do you get across to people that that's okay, and that there are circumstances and ways to do that?
Well, it's a healthy thing to do, and I make sure that I frame that to where that doesn't mean wearing your heart on your sleeve every 5 seconds. Okay. But it's a healthy thing to do, because it's a healthy emotion and expression, that there is a time and place, and that it is okay. In fact, it's a healthy thing to do, to cry when it's there. You need to do that, because if you don't, if you suppress it, it's going to come out in actions. It's going to come out when you least expect it or when you want it. You talk to someone who's going through grief, and this happens a lot with survivors, and you talk about the difficulty that especially the man has in going out in public afterwards, because he'll have tears and cry, and it's embarrassing because they can't control that. It's just happening to them. And so what they have, you sign them start to withdraw and starting to cut themselves off. They don't want to be seen at work. They don't want to be seen around, because they can't control that. And so the idea that it's okay to have that, and in fact, here's the time and place to do it, so do some proper grief work, and here is where you let it out and go, and it's healthy, and it's okay to do that. Then all of a sudden they learn that they can control it a little bit better and say, okay, no, it's not going to come up at the least opportune time when I expect it. It's not going to come up in a business meeting when all of a sudden it hits. I've learned to manage that a little bit better. And so you have to be able to say it is okay and experience it, and because you can manage it a little bit better. And so that's part of the normal grief process, is learning how to grieve. If you try and keep all that stuff up and try and push away, it's going to come in no matter what. It's still going to come at you.
And do you get a sense that there's a cultural shift happening at that level?
I do. And the fact that people are talking about this, and maybe it's just I'm more and more involved in it, and so maybe I'm in the inner circle now, than before I didn't even know there was a circle, but maybe I'm there. But what I see when I'm talking to different groups is that acceptance of oh, okay, yeah, and the idea of having a book says real men do cry, being accepted, as opposed to, well, I don't want to do that book. What's that going to be about? You know what I mean? And that's not me. And I think when I first put the book out there, there was some of that. I even felt it. When I'd go on and say, okay, here's my book, Real Men Do Cry. I had even that little stigma, self-conscious thing, and said, well, I want to explain to people what it's about before I tell them, because I think, oh, crybaby. You know what I mean? But there is more acceptance, and I think in people are understanding, especially if we can just promote this idea, the responsibility thing, that you're responsible for the choices from whatever point you want to start from that point forward. Then I'm responsible to be healthy. Okay, and if I am, then it's okay to go out there. It's okay for me to want to be healthy. It's okay, if we don't expect somebody to if they're going to go and perform in a game, we have training camp, because they have to be in shape before they go there. Well, that's no different than anything else. If you're going to be at performance level, then be mentally healthy too. Which should be part. It should be part of what we need to be. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the culture's starting to shift there. That it's okay to reach out. It's okay to talk.
Now, you've put yourself out there as a family member, as a survivor, and so you encounter other people who share some level of your story. How do you communicate with them? What are your messages that you try to get out to people?
I might say that before you go there, when you said, I put myself out there with the family, there was even some difficulty there when I first came out with the story, because the family, well, do we have to say this? Do we have to talk about that? And my wife wasn't really happy at first. It's like, I don't know if we want to talk about those things. What about the kids? What's going to happen? Now people are going to know the difficulties you went through, and how's that going to affect the kids? So there's a lot of that went through, and we sat down and talked it over. And I think now, from when first, started talking about it, that has changed a little bit. But I'm certainly concerned. But when I start dealing with other people that look at that, and how does that affect us, if that's where you're headed, is I think honesty for one. Talk about these things do exist. I would say within a month after my son died, I had people coming up to my house and saying, hey, we know this happened to our family too. So many people that did. I go, oh my gosh, why do we bury this thing? Because that would have been nice to know information as somebody to reach out to. And so I think that's, being able to put yourself out there and say, I've gone through this, and if I can help you, so you don't have to go through this, then it's okay. And I think people will listen to that, and there's a lot of people that, a lot of families that come up and say, hey, you've gone through this, I'm experiencing this, what do I do? So I just guide them to resources the best thing you can. I guess that's the best way to do it, is just guide them to resources and say, learn first. Make yourself knowledgeable to what these issues are, because if you learn about something, you can usually manage it and usually deal with it. It's when you don't know and you cower and you're afraid of it, that it'll bite you.
What are some of the resources that you like to hook people up with?
Well, there are a lot of different sites to go to, and I was always leery about putting sites out there sometimes because you don't know what they are. But if you're trying to gain knowledge on depression, of course, we have one. It's depressioncenter.org, and a lot of information there. If you're trying to find out about other illnesses, you can go there. But I always very leery when people just want to tap in suicide into the internet, because it comes back. A lot of things come back that aren't appropriate, and a lot of things come back. I mean, talking on how to do things and stuff like that, and a lot of negative stuff that's out there. So be concerned about that. And so AAS, American Association of Suicidology. So AAS, you can just Google it. I guess the best way to know the whole thing. And there's AFSP. There's the SPRC.org, Suicide Prevention Resource Center.org. We have a site that's called DepressionToolkit.org, which is a great site because it's on sleep, it's on eating, it's on medications, it's on questions asked. There's scales to self evaluate and screen, and there's a whole lot of things on there. And just filling yourself with information is good. So that's a really good one, DepressionToolkit.org.
Do you work with people on looking for warning signs in loved ones and whatnot?
Yeah, and I think that's important for us to be able to. And I run into a lot of mental health. Not only mental health workers, but also healthcare providers and workers, and in fact, some of my audience I talk to. And I find that in their everyday job, they're used to asking and screening people out, but when you get home and they've got their own family members and they've got their friends and family, and sometimes they don't see it, because they're used to doing this, and so that familiarity thing, when they're around those that are familiar, they quit assessing, and looking, and not that they have to tear things apart. But so I say, instead of going through a whole checklist, with an individual, that might be great to do when we're sitting here and you're coming to me, and let's check and see what's going on here. That's one thing. But it's better to be able to just be aware and look for people the way that they behave. In other words, so look for changes in the sleep, changes in their appearance. Do they look like the weight of the world's on them? What are the cities like? How do their eyes, show? Because you can tell somebody's happy, you can tell somebody's sad, you can tell somebody's, angry, you can tell somebody's bothered, the weight of the world, they're stressed out. So it's a whole body effect, really. And that's where I say, look at that, use your gut, this doesn't seem right. If it doesn't seem right, don't be afraid to ask somebody what's going on. So be able to ask somebody, so, everything okay? Typically, they're going to say, oh yeah, everything's fine. But if you don't think so, ask them again, because the second time around they're going to go, oh, maybe this person's serious, and they do want to listen, and so they'll say something.
Your approach there to the awareness and noticing the changes of things strikes me as equating directly to your life as a quarterback, because you're having to notice things around you all the time. You're having to evaluate things all the time and what's going on and making decisions about that. And do you ever kind of bring that into the discussion with kids, with players, people who are kind of growing up in sports to kind of draw that link for people?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of times, you can sit there and say, well, if they line up, I know you can't see this, but anyway, if I show you a defense and you see that on the field, this is probably going to be a blitz. But a lot of times you don't get a chance to see everything that's happening, but you feel it. This doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? So, and sometimes it's just that the field test. It doesn't feel right. So then be observant. As far as being able to link that in, let's see, what was it?
Link it into how you're trying to read your friends and how you're trying to read the people around you.
I think that awareness part of that is in fact, when we deal with, we actually have a program. It's called Under the Helmet, that myself and a guy named Jim Tack, he lost his son to suicide, but he's a coach in Pennsylvania, high school coach, high school Hall of Fame coach, by the way. And so we started looking at things and what can we do to make things a little bit easier. So we tried to design something that the coach, the player, and the parent are all on the same page. Because if they're on the same page, it's going to be a good experience. It's when one of them's not on the same page, and now the kid goes home, he's got pressures from the parent because they don't understand what's going on. How come you're not playing? How come you're not this? Now the kid's caught in a barrel. He's going over there, and the coach is going on, and the coach is now, and so all that stuff starts falling apart, and not for a good experience. And so how do we get those three people on the same page? And so we've worked pretty hard to try and get that. And a lot of it is be able to communicate, okay, be able to assess, because if something isn't right, okay, let's handle it now, okay, and let's get in front of it and not let it go until it festers and becomes a really big problem.
Right now, you seem like you're pretty upbeat. You seem like you're pretty forward-thinking and hopeful. How does that come about?
That's just you. You got me going, man. How did that come about? It's been a process, and I'm not without my own stumbles every once in a while, where I get down and I have my own stress, things that happen. But I think I'm able to look at it and learn from what I've gone through before, and to be able to sit back and kind of assess it a little bit and say, now's the time. Let's get really mindful. Okay, here's what's happening. Here's what's going on, and not get caught up. And all of a sudden run down that, let's solve the problem here, okay, and not get down that thing, and all of a sudden I start getting down that tunnel until all of a sudden, start thinking that, I'm a burden on other people and they'd be better off without me, and all of a sudden my problem-solving tool is this. If I'm not around, that solves all the problems. That doesn't, okay? It just creates a lot of pain for everybody else. And so occasionally, I've got to step back and check back and say, you know what, things are okay, and it's started doing some mindfulness stuff, which is, being now in the moment, not let things bother you, worry you, those things that you can't control or whatever, you got to let them go, and be in the moment right now with those that are around you and enjoy them for what you can.
A lot of our audience, I think, for programs of this nature are frontline mental health professionals, the social workers, the counselors, psychologists, those folks. What's kind of your message to them, you think?
It's the oldest thing in the book, I guess, is, and it's been said over and over again, but I'll say it again. It's just like the airlines, when there's a problem, that mask drops down, you put it over your mouth first to take care of you before you can take care of somebody else. And that's the same thing. The responsible thing for somebody to do, you think, I've got to take everybody, I've got to take care of everybody, I've got to take care of everybody, and the next thing you know, you're not in a position to take care of everybody because you haven't taken care of yourself. And so for those frontline workers who experience a great amount of stress and are caught up in the empathy of helping somebody else, it actually affects them as well. They have to stand back. The responsible thing to do is to make sure that you're okay, because if you're okay, then you can be responsible for others. And so just step back once in a while, and reevaluate and take a deep breath, and get going again. You don't have to save the world, even though many of them, are compelled and through compassion feel like they have to, and they end up running themselves out of gas, and that's not good. So take care of themselves too.
Thanks, Eric.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank
you for your time, folks, and watching this program today. As always, keep in mind that there are a lot of resources that you can avail yourselves of, and keep in mind that the National Suicide Lifeline is always available to you as well. And that number is 1-800-273-TALK. That's 8255, 1-800-273-TALK. So again, thank you for your time in taking this training program. And Eric, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.